All right, we're back. We've got Matt Ragland on the show. And if I can provoke you or prod you, dear listener, to watch any of our YouTube videos, this would be the one to watch because in addition to being a creator, Matt has ready-made a career as a hair YouTube influencer as well. I'm jealous just as we're sitting here, Matt, looking at you. So thank you for joining the show and thank you for your locks of love.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you saying that. You're not the first one to
Okay.
make that comment, so I feel very fortunate. I'm still waiting for some of my hair brand deals to come in because the influencing
It's
is
some good
high.
lettuce. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's happy to be here. Thank you, man. Thank you. I just took like 6 inches
Wow.
off like last month,
That's
so
awesome.
it was a lot. Yeah, it was
Well,
even
in
more.
addition to your burgeoning, beauty career, Matt, you have done a bunch of different things in the content space. I think you are one of the great examples of what a lot of us aspire to do, right? You worked at a content related company for a long time, which we'd love to hear about, and have made this transition into being a creator full time, in addition to starting your own agency. But for those who aren't familiar with you, maybe give us that story. How did that come together over the last several years?
Sure. And I'm glad you made the point that it was several years for me. I don't think it has to be that way for everyone, but the way the content has changed, content marketing, the way that blogs and social media and YouTube have all changed, I've done it all with varying scales of success. But I first started blogging about 10 years ago, WordPress.com blog, and made the change to self-hosted. I was writing for a while. I did a 30 episode run of a podcast myself back in 2014, which is pretty wild thinking
Yeah, you were
back.
early.
um, and then imagine if I had stuck with it, which we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that thought, that temptation. But in 2015, I started applying for jobs in content and creator focused startups, and I got pretty close with a couple. My most memorable interview was I was a finalist for a product manager role at backcountry.com, and I got flown out to Salt Lake City and Park
Oh,
City for a
cool.
couple of days to do interviews with the team. That was super cool. But then I ended up working at Convertkit in late 2015. I was the fifth member
Wow.
of the team at Convertkit. Less than a thousand. We had less than
Wow.
500 customers at the time that I joined. And I started working on the success and onboarding team and also migrations. And that's where I started to not just I was always kind of continuing my own creative work. I wrote some for the ConvertKit blog. I was doing my own writing on my site and on Medium. At that point, Medium was
Hmm.
like super big 5 years ago. And the other thing that made a big difference to me was I started interacting with a lot of the creators that I admired. And one of the things that you may not expect from that type of interaction was not that I learned some particular tip or trick or secret strategy that like helped me in any big way. A lot of it was just the confidence of seeing that, yes, these people are prolific and in their own way they are special, but there's nothing super special about them that I don't have. And maybe I didn't like fully believe that before, but the more that I interacted with creators that I admired, well, they're really great people, but they're also like not
Sure. Yeah.
that much better than me. And that understanding of that confidence, I would be like, okay, well, they've all been in the situation that I am in right now, and I can just continue to make progress. The tipping point for me in my creative career came when I started on YouTube. I think it was in 2017. I started my YouTube channel February 2017, and I made a commitment I did a video every day to start, and that just helped. That helped me that helped me like just add content and get the reps in, which is a concept we'll come back to. But it also helped me fill up my YouTube channel. Like anybody can obviously put videos on YouTube, but when someone lands on your channel and they find a video like through YouTube that resonates with them, you want to give them a back catalog of content to then be able to binge through. And just having content available is the best way to do that. And so the quicker you can like add in a back catalog, even if it's relatively short, like I would say, we're getting into strategy a little bit, but I would say like make more small things early than like big things, because one, you'll fill up your back catalog faster and people can piece your content together. And two, I don't, especially early on, like spending too much time on a single piece of content, because early on, you're not going to know what really resonates with people that much. And so just think of like one piece of content and one core idea for the topic. A brand that does this really well right now, and a course brand is Ship 30 for 30. Anybody who's been on Twitter is familiar in the Twitter like creator space is familiar with Ship 30 at this point, but they do a really good job of this. And I think you can take that same concept of like, instead of thinking like I have to write a 1,000-word essay or I have to have a 2,000-word blog post or whatever, just think like, what can I write? What is the one thing that I can communicate in 250-ish words, and do the same thing several times per week instead of like once a week, or even worse. The thing that kills so many early stage creators is not a lack of ideas and is not a lack of quality, even it's a lack of consistency. And it's better to if you have like say 2,000 to 3,000 words of ideas or 20 to 30 minutes of video content or podcast content inside of you, it's better to space that out among 3 to 4 to 5 pieces of content over the course of a month than just one big batch right at the beginning.
We are doing a version of this with our YouTube channel because we've been predominantly focused on podcasts, and so are now building. And I think Shorts is really making this approachable for creators of all kinds of abilities, because you don't have to be able to edit
absolutely
a 10-minute video. You can do something that's 60 seconds to 30 seconds and build up the backlog that way. I want to poke on a couple of things.
Yeah.
So first, you said you did create the podcast back in 2014, and you did some blogging as well. Was that around the same concepts of productivity, and like, were you already thinking about those topics back then, or were they different endeavors?
They were different endeavors. I was thinking about productivity then, but not in a expression of content sort of way. It was just something that I was really interested in personally, and I wanted to optimize my time. And so I was getting into calendar, time blocking. I think Deep Work came out around then, and I had read Deep Work, but the topics for those were very much around the concept of marketing, storytelling as a marketing device, or vice versa. And so I don't even think the podcast is really live, because I definitely stopped paying for Libsyn a long time ago. Is the name of the podcast though was Story Signals. And one of the things that was really good about that, the most valuable part of it, and you probably experience this now, it's one of the best parts about podcasts, is the connections that you can make with people. So when you have a podcast, and when you have shown your ability to publish podcasts and carry a conversation and be a good host and ask interesting questions, you can reach out to a good number of people. And I think for me, a couple of like key connections that I made during that podcast that have paid off since in different ways. One was in 2014, I interviewed James Clear, which, he was just like, his first website was called Passive Panda. I think he was still kind of doing some Passive Panda stuff at that point. So I got to talk to James way back then, and we've stayed in touch. Another one that probably a lot of listeners may not recognize, but his name is Ryan Delk. And Ryan, is good friends with Nathan Barry, who is the founder of Convertkit, and they were in a mastermind together. And so when I was interviewing with Nathan for a role at Convertkit, I was able to make a connection with Delk. And from as far as I know, Delk gave me like a good thumbs
Very
up
cool.
because we had a good
Yeah.
podcast conversation together. And so, that was a year before at that point, but it had certainly paid off. So there's a they were different topics, but one of the other things that like I don't always talk expressly about because it's not my topic, but I've always been very intentional and very focused on like good relationships and building relationships and building a positive network as well. And that has like paid off, for lack of a better term, in multiple ways, both literal and relationally, over the
Yeah.
past 10 years. And
I love that. I think it's such a great point, and listeners of this show know when you were doing your show. That's about when we launched our first podcast, and unfortunately, after about 18 months, like got all the guests that you were describing, and ran out of steam after like 75 episodes. And it's I don't have very many regrets, but
Mhm.
it's probably the biggest regret I have is not continuing that to this point, because it was just such a
Mm,
bigger show at the time, so much more attention. And, like you
yeah.
said, what if we would have just kept with it? Weirdly, just funny. I go to church with Ryan Delk's parents. So yeah,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
super
How about
small
that?
world there. But um,
Yeah. He's great. I haven't talked to him in a
the other
while,
thing
but
that
he's
you
a great
mentioned
guy.
was that you started creating a YouTube video every day. Was that when were you
Mhm.
still full time employed at ConvertKit at the time?
Yeah, I was full time at ConvertKit. The first 3 years that I had the channel, I was like full time at either
Okay,
ConvertKit or Podia. I certainly did not keep up the daily cadence, but my goal at the time, and this is my goal at the time, was just to publish the video. Like uh, Gary Vee's channel was really
sure.
was really really big at that time. It's still really big, but it was really 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 big at that time. And there was something that he said that really stuck in my head and has continued to whenever I get into a lull with YouTube, even though YouTube has very much changed over the past 5 years. The expectation of
Yeah.
quality is way different, but at the time, Gary was saying like
Mm-hmm.
document, don't create, document, don't create, document, don't create, and that really stuck in my head. And that was my principle for the show, for the channel at that time. Was we were actually in we moved to Chattanooga that month.
Yep.
We were just talking about that, and so there was just a lot going on in life. We had a almost 2 year old son. We were living in this little apartment. My wife and I were both working full time. We were like doing all kinds of things, and I was just recording, doing like the
Okay.
daily vlog thing, really. And I was trying to what what a more consistent cadence. We talked about like making multiple small bets, say like in the ship 30 model. You can do a similar thing with say like a 3 to 5 minute video. Again, one idea, one concept. But the thing that was helpful to me at the time was if I'm doing a lot of videos or you're writing a lot of content, you can try a lot of different content types or topics without feeling like just
Mm-hmm.
one has to hit. And so I was talking about marketing, I was talking about parenting, I was talking about fitness, I was talking about working at startups, I was talking about customer development and onboarding and like all these different things. And after about 6 months of doing daily and then going into weekly, I made a video that was called how I plan my week in a bullet journal. And so that was like my first specific, super specific productivity video. And even more so for that, I just basically happened upon the bullet
Mm.
journal community on YouTube, which is quite vibrant and very willing to watch videos. And what I saw at the time is, I think at that point, after 6 months, my most popular videos were two maybe 300 views. It definitely was not taking off, which is a side thing that you have
Sure.
to enjoy enjoy what you're doing. And I was really enjoying making videos. So I made this productivity bullet journal video. And I noticed after maybe a month that it had like 500 views. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then like another month went by and it was getting close to the end of the year and it was up to like 800 views, but it was kind of like slowing down. I was like, oh, well, it's still like, 5 times as popular as my normal videos were at this point. So I decided, and I had around, so this was December 2017. I had been vlogging for almost a year and had about 650 subscribers, and my most popular video had 800 views. I made another bullet journal video that I released the day after Christmas that was basically titled like how I plan my year in a bullet journal. And my goal at that time was like, I hope this video eventually helps me get to 1,000 subscribers and is my first 1,000 view video. And within like 2 days, it hit 1,000 views, which at the time for me, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And within a week, I had gone from basically 700 to 1,000 subscribers. And then for the next 6 months, I basically made some kind of bullet journal related video almost every week for the next 6 months. And in those 6 months, I went from 1,000 subscribers to 10,000 subscribers. And it was really wild. I still have not had, like, I probably haven't had that kind of growth since, which is like a whole other conversation that I don't think I can fully answer. But like 2018, I went from 1,000 to like 18,000 subscribers that year. And I definitely have not had that kind of growth since, which again is a different conversation and a something that I still haven't quite cracked yet. But the last thing that I want to say about it is I just started to turn all of the ideas and especially all the things that I was doing from a productivity perspective through the lens of the bullet journal. So it was a bunch of things. I used the bullet journal basically as a Trojan horse for how I looked at the world. And so it's like, if it's how to calendar block, it's like, here's how I calendar. Like, well, I calendar block. Here's how to do it in a bullet journal. I track my to-dos. Here's how I do it in a bullet journal. So as long as the other thing, and this was like more specific for me at the time, but it's always helpful from a content perspective to think about how far down can you reasonably niche. We all, and I say niche, not niche. So come at me, whoever disagrees. But it's helpful to have like 2 or 3 levers that you can niche down on. And so like, it's not just productivity, it's the bullet journal. And it's not just the bullet journal, it's from a guy's perspective, because most of the bullet journal channels are run by women and they're wonderful. And then even like further down that is, it's a very minimal kind of Spartan layout. It's not decorated. It's not artsy. Because not all those things are usually mutually exclusive. So it's productivity, it's analog, bullet journal. It's, more targeted at males, even though I never was like super intentional about that. And then it's very minimal. So like taking those layers down, because there are plenty of dudes who like to write down their tasks and not use a task manager per se, and don't want to draw on their notebook. So, and there are also plenty of women who like don't care to draw or don't want to draw or themselves. So like going a few layers deep on a niche really helped someone come to my channel and think, oh, this is the thing for me. So anytime you want to start at a top level topic, like how far down can you niche?
So practically speaking, was it going through that year period of weekly publishing and then figuring out that filtration system of those? Were those the 2 main levers that allowed you to go from part-time employee at ConvertKit, full-time employee at ConvertKit, part-time creator to full-time doing this? Yeah, because as the audience grew, I was also like, I was working at Convertkit at the time, and then I was working at Podia, which is a course and product platform for creators.
And so like I just had the good fortune of understanding those levers in the creator like stack as well. So from day one, I was collecting email addresses, and then pretty soon, once the email list was active again, there was a short course, and then there was a like 1 week workshop intensive, and so there was like a steady progression, and so um, yeah, that it was all connected. It was all strategic at the time to be able to do that. But I think like as you can look at how you build those things, it's it's not impossible, but I like honestly, in my experience, it's unlikely these days that most people, especially early on in their process, are going to have like a $20,000, $50,000 launch event that's going to allow you to
Yeah.
quit your job. Um, like one, those were probably more prevalent when like ebooks and courses were like a brand new thing for the first time, and like again the bar was lower, which is fine, especially based on what we see now. But like what I've done and what I see a lot of people do now when they're trying to make this like full time operator, like salary to side hustle to full time creator, is that it is a very iterative process. So I would make 5,000, then 15,000, then 20,000, and then I had to also be disciplined enough to start saving some of those things as well. Like, and everyone's circumstances are different. Like when I went full time, I had 2 kids, and now I have 3 kids. And so I wanted to, thanks. I needed to, I had 6 months of expenses in the bank. And, full disclosure, um, I sold some investments and took another 3 months of runway out. And so it ended up being that I probably needed, like based on unless we were really going to take a step back from our lifestyle, which is more challenging, like, lifestyle creep is a real thing. It's challenging to do that. Is like, I probably needed 9 months and probably closer to a year, um, but I would still say probably 6 months was solid, and because like I don't know how much longer it would have taken me to get to a year of expenses, and how much I would have like given myself excuses to keep waiting.
Our audience is
eventually you have to go for it.
My version of that several times, but similar thing. 6 months was the number we started with. And we weren't back to even after 6 months, but there was enough of a light at the end of the tunnel that it was like, okay, let's just keep pressing forward.
Yeah.
So that brings us sort of to what you are doing now. Obviously, you talked about other creators being prolific. I think you're a prolific content creator, and all the different things that you're doing. Tell us about your content flywheel and what it looks like today.
Yeah. So even though my main channel is on YouTube, most of my flywheel starts with writing, and I send a newsletter twice a week. That is a thing that almost every week does get done. At least one send goes out every week. And I would say over a quarter, I probably only miss the second send like 2 times. But that's getting better and better. The flywheel starts with writing, and a lot of times it'll even start with a tweet. So it'll be a fragment of an idea that I might share on Twitter. And if it gets some traction, if it gets even a couple of replies and a handful of likes, I'll think, okay, there's something there. Because I'm not huge on Twitter. And so like, some engagement is like a good sign, a good signal for me. And so I'll expand on that idea in the newsletter. And if something, but I also will often just start with an idea that I have for the newsletter. If that hits for the newsletter, I will often then turn that into a YouTube video, because I know like this is working. And then in the YouTube video, and I also source these through email replies or Twitter comments, is if someone, and this was really big for me when I made that first jump from 1K to 10K in 2018, is if anyone comments, especially on a video that says like, oh, this thing that you talked about briefly, I found really interesting, or I would love it if you clarified this some more. Like as an example, I told you I did the annual planning video. Well, one of the things that I talked about there was a time blocking strategy I called the 10 blocks, but I talked about it for like 90 seconds. And lots of people in the comments were like, oh, what's this 10 block thing? Can you explain it again? And you didn't really spend any time on it. It's like a 30-minute video. So there were lots of things. But then the very next video that I made was like, oh, yeah, well, let me do a deep dive on the 10 blocks. And that video did really well. Those are still like probably two of my top 5 most popular videos are those two. So anytime you can get engagement, questions, comments from an audience, that should feed into your flywheel, because you know that there you literally know there's something there. You don't have to guess. It's literally right there. And then the other piece of this is just through a curated. This sounds pretentious. A curated information diet.
So good.
Sounds very pretentious, and I'm not as good at it as the pretension shit sounds. But I do have a rough but workable system of capturing ideas, notes, and highlights from different things I read, watch, or just think of. And I take time out of each week to like develop recent ideas. That's really important. I don't press myself to do it. I don't like, if there's an idea that isn't resonating anymore, I don't like try and bring something up. But if there's something that does, like, it sparks enough for me to make some kind of highlight or note about it, and then when I go back through it again and there's still something there, I was like, okay, there's something there for me. And so I'll elaborate on it a little bit, just like in the note on the file, wherever it happens to live. Usually for me, that is in Notion or Roam. And so now I have like basically building blocks of content. Tiago Forte talks about this a lot in Building a Second Brain. Marie Poulin is great at developing these as well. But now if I don't feel creative, I don't feel inspired, maybe there's nothing that I've written on Twitter that has like had any impact recently, then I can go through these like recent notes and ideas and be like, okay, this still sounds interesting. And I actually have like a sentence or two of content that I can plug directly into the newsletter and then build from there.
Just observing through what you just said, you talked about your Twitter following being maybe a seedling of an idea, and then taking it to your newsletter, and then potentially taking it to YouTube. Obviously, I'm sure there's all versions of that, but in that stack, I might be wrong, but that seems like your least. So Twitter's where you seem like you have your smallest following. Newsletter is bigger, and YouTube is obviously biggest. Is that intentional, like that you test ideas on the smaller scale and then expand?
Yeah, I'd never thought of it that way.
Okay,
I never thought of it that way, but I think it's more about just what Twitter is. Like Twitter is micro thoughts. And the expectation is I can share like the seed of an idea, the spark of an idea. And if someone's like, "Ooh, that's interesting," or "Oh, tell me more. What do you mean by that?" I'm like, "Okay, well, I can not just elaborate on Twitter, but I can be like, okay, let me write this out a little bit more in the newsletter." And the newsletter, there's also like a progression of scripting almost as well. So I can, if I write about something in the newsletter that then becomes part of a video, then I can take sections of that and turn it into part of the script.
Now,
for a
in
video.
addition to all that you do as a creator and sort of mimicking actually what you've built here in terms of a flywheel and such, I know you have an agency as well that sort of provides part of that to other creators. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is relatively new for me. In 2021, that was last year. I was all courses, coaching, YouTube videos. And then I had also started doing some operations work on the side, like helping creators like me with their email newsletters, with their courses. And I connected with another like former ConvertKit colleague. His name's Daryl Vesterfeld. He was the first head of growth at ConvertKit. We both started around the same time, but he had done some educational course operations in the past as well. So we joined forces and built up a little team. And one of the things we noticed as we started building courses or operating courses for these creators is, surprise, surprise, the ones who were sending the most consistent emails were the ones that were getting the most sales, and especially the best conversion rates. And so during the summer, I mean, literally this summer, we started pivoting some of our service from like course development and operations to managing email newsletters for creators. And the way that works for us is it is a little bit like a ghostwriting service. There's a ghostwriting component to it, but the way that we've organized it and the service that we provide to the creators is not simply like, hey, let us ghostwrite your newsletter. It's literally let us take the whole thing off of your plate. Because the people that we tend to work with are not super active newsletter writers right now. They have an email list, and maybe they've done it in the past or they do it occasionally. But the value is there to send weekly to improve their course sales, to get them more clients, depending on their business model, or to do newsletter sponsors, which is something that the ConvertKit Sponsor Network has really been helping a lot of creators with recently, myself included. And so when you send weekly, everything else gets better for your business. And so what we do is we use the creator's own content flywheel, but they don't have to do anything with it. We do all the research for back catalog content, then we write, we edit, we send it to the client for review. So if they want to change anything, they can. But then we take it the rest of the way also. It's not just like, here's a Google Doc with your newsletter, have fun in ConvertKit. We proof it, we put it in ConvertKit, we handle the automation, the linking, and then we schedule it and send it. And so our clients don't have to log into ConvertKit, but they still get a newsletter that goes out.
It's such a beautiful thing for, I know a lot of creators that we work with can get overwhelmed with, like, I don't want to learn the technology. And what's beautiful with this is you have obviously a ton of experience with the platform and have built the content yourself for your own brand. So have both of those sides of experience. Matt, this has been awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Part of it sounds a little infomercially. Sometimes it's like, not only can I do this for you, but I'm also a client myself. And I show like, this is like an edition of my newsletter that I didn't write. Like, it's part of a YouTube video, part of a podcast series that I did in the past. So it is still in my voice, but like writing those words in this way and putting it into ConvertKit, I didn't do that. But
yeah, and I think, I mean, anybody who's created anything understands the lift that comes with that. Like, this is one of my big hills to die on right now so I used to work for Gary Vee, obviously love him. I think the idea of repurposing content and the way that what he means behind it is different than the way that it gets used and just plastered.
Yep.
And to me, that what you're describing is a beautiful way of repurposing content. You've talked about a topic, you have it, but then you have other experts who make that tailored to the platform. And I think that's what he actually intends.
Exactly. And I've always taken that like from him. I've actually like used I was talking to someone today who was going to take like pieces from their newsletter and turn it into Twitter threads. I was like, don't just copy and paste like into it, like make it a Twitter thread. Like, it should be native content. And so that's what we do. And I think it is interesting and helpful to people is like, if you have a YouTube video that we can turn into a month of newsletters, this isn't just transcribe, copy, paste. It's like, we're going to get to like the heart of the topic, and we will like still use your words, still like use your screenshots and everything, but we're going to make it into an email. It's not just a copy paste transcription. It's going to be a good newsletter.
Matt, I feel like we could talk I could talk for hours with you, just with so many more questions, but I want to be mindful of time. And we ask every guest that comes on, what is something, either a trend that you are noticing, or just something that you have going on, maybe even with your agency, that you're particularly excited about going forward?
I'm really excited about the opportunity for sponsorships for newsletter creators. And it's something that can be really, really impactful. It can help you monetize sooner rather than later. And it's something that, does take some work to like source brands. The Convertkit Creator Network, which I've already, or a sponsor network, which I've already mentioned, is doing a lot of that legwork for
Can
creators.
you can you just
But
can you just give
I
us your
I
little?
think
I know you tweeted a case study, but it was so memorable and so powerful. Can you just describe that?
yeah. So I didn't start. Like I said, this is all. Some of this is very
Yeah.
recent for me as well. But it can be challenging to find sponsors and to like go through the whole like negotiating, pitching, media kit, the whole thing. And there's still some of that that is like table stakes to start getting sponsorships. But it got to a point where, again, like I'm very mindful of my time and the impact of my time. And so it was always a case to me of like, okay, well, I could spend, you know, a, I don't know, a couple of days, a couple of weeks, not of like total time, but like over the span of a couple of weeks, I could try and like nail down this brand deal, or I could just do a workshop and make the same amount of money, or I could like work on my course, or I could go find a new client. It was always like such an additional lift, even for me that like understands 90% of the components. It was
Yeah.
still a lot. But what the ConvertKit sponsor network does is they just send you, they're like, here's your
That's
sponsor. And you get to approve everything, but it's not anyone that I wouldn't want to work with. But they're like, they simply like, hey, do you want to work with this one? We're like, great. They're like, cool, here's the link, here's the copy, here's the image. Just put it into your email and you'll get paid at the end of the month. So I went from doing like a very occasional one-off email sponsorship that was always connected to a YouTube sponsorship. So I would just like throw it in there like, hey, extra $500. You want to do a couple of emails? They're like, sure. I'm like, great, free money for me. But now like I get like basically $400 to $500 per insertion on my newsletter, and I send twice a week. So 8 sends on average usually per month. And that's $4,000 that 2 months ago was just not there, and I'm doing the same work. So the opportunity, so that's becoming more and more mainstream. I think the last thing that I would say about it is don't get stuck thinking that you have to be like over 10,000 or even over 5,000 to get a sponsorship. There are like mechanics in place and there are opportunities for that. I think it's worth the experience to start trying to do those things. And one other person to shout out on the sponsorship front, his name is Justin Moore. He's the creator wizard on Twitter, and he has like millions of dollars in sponsorships booked over the past 5-10-ish years with his own channels. And he's been a great resource for me and many others, like figuring out, no matter the size of your platform or audience, how you can start getting sponsorships and brand deals.
Incredible. That's such a great practical thing for the listeners to use, and can go start using that today, especially if you're already using ConvertKit. Matt, if people want to check out your work, if they want to check out your channels, where's the best place to send them as we go out from here?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Matt Ragland. You can also like find out more about my agency and the offer, and get on an email list for that, regardless of whether we work directly or not. But go to yourweekly.email.
Yourweekly.email. And we will link all of that below. We appreciate your time. We know you value it, and we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. Appreciate it.